One. Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I am your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ema. Hey, Ema.
Hello, my lovey, lovey, and today we are together for Yanta.
Yes, we're together for Yantif. Um, this week's topic, we have a few questions, a few stories, but I think we'll kind of play it fast and loose like we normally do. So you talked about,
Fasting on Yom Kippur.
oh yeah, how was fast? How was Yom Kippur?
You know something? Last year,
Yeah.
when I got sick with this very, very high fever, and I had to drink water all Yom Kippur,
Hmm.
and doctor's orders, it made me realize it put a whole new perspective on fasting. Because usually when it comes to fasting on Yom Kippur, everyone's like, I'm going to fast 24 hours. I can't take, And because of what I went through last year, I actually was looking forward to fasting on Yom Kippur. I looked at it in a entirely new perspective, that like a like a privilege.
Yeah.
Like I felt it was. I kept praying to God, please, this year keep me healthy so I can fast. And it was like I was actually happy to be able to fast.
You know, it's funny because you say that, and I felt the same way this year, where I actually enjoyed it. I wasn't. I mean, I enjoyed it up until the end when like the fast was officially over and the
Mm.
chazan was kvetching for 20 more minutes, and I was like, I'm not doing this. That's it. I'm bouncing. And then after the 20-minute waiting period, I just finished Don Marv and went home. But it was a lot of fun. I did enjoy it a lot more than I normally would have. Which is funny because I think I talked about this in the podcast last week, but with
Mhm.
Rosh Hashanah, I was just like so exhausted that I you took 2 cups of coffee and I was trying to stay up and I fell asleep. But you were talking about wasted information when Aunt Judy came over, and we're talking about how like even though it's wasted information that you learn, you still wind up using it later on in life.
Oh yeah, we're talking about, yeah, like education in general. Like a lot of people look at their formal education, and they studied algebra, and they studied physics, and they studied all of these subjects in history, and social studies, and so people sometimes will look back and say, all those hours I studied biology and algebra and everything, and now I never use it. Like, what's the sense? Well, what it is that the purpose of your formal education is to cover all bases, that we don't know where life's going to take us.
Yeah.
And so therefore, who knows? You might be the one to go into mathematics. You might be the one to go in biology. And if not, so okay, but at least you've got, you know, you've got that background. And yeah, I'll tell you the truth, as a teacher, I've taught many different subjects, and with each subject I taught, when a kid had trouble and I called the parents, I got, no matter what the subject was, I got excuses. Well, like when I taught Hebrew school, well, he's not going to be a rabbi.
Mhm.
I had a kid that was having trouble in English. English, language arts, regular spelling, grammar, sentence structure. Called the parents. Well, we're going to really make Aliyah to Israel soon, and she really doesn't need English. Guess what? I took a visit back to that community where I was teaching, and I asked some people about it. I said, did they make Aliyah? They never made Aliyah.
Yeah.
They never made Aliyah. And here, this girl, instead of her mother trying to help her get the language skills that she needed, I don't know what happened to her, but who knows? Now she's in this country without the language skills that she needs.
Well, I don't know because I remember being in school and not doing so well in certain classes and certain courses, and Tati
Mhm,
always telling the whole idea of like Einstein failed math kind of stories, and not
mhm.
to worry about it too much, and also seeing the way society has wound up, you know, giving different people different parts of life where it's like C's get degrees. C students are the ones that work the hardest and that are the most successful. A students and B students, they're more along the lines of winding up doing work, but
Wait a
you
minute, where do you get these statistics? Because I heard about a study, just the opposite, that in fact, they, in the study that they did, that they found that people who did well in school did well in all other areas of life because they were the type of people who were used to working hard and trying, whereas slackers who really didn't work so hard in school and took C's and D's and didn't care, they also don't care in other aspects
I
of
think
life.
we had this conversation like a little while ago, by the way.
Good, could be.
Honestly, the past
We're
couple of
getting older,
episodes,
we're starting to repeat our
it's
stories.
not that. I think we're just scraping at the end of the barrel. Like I'm trying to figure out like what to do, and it's just like I think we've talked about this stuff before. We've discussed this stuff before. I remember.
So our new listeners will also hear it now.
No, 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 no. We got to think of better angles and better things to do and better things to discuss.
Ah, okay,
Y-
so what should we discuss?
I mean, I even thinking that the story that you were
That's
talking
my
earlier.
Yontif.
Sure, Yontif,
Cooking for
cooking
Yontif.
for Yontif,
Honey cake recipes.
honey cake recipes,
Chicken recipes.
chicken recipes.
Beef
What
recipes.
what was a recipe you've always wanted to try and never got around to doing?
Goose.
Goose?
I
You
always
always.
wanted them. Your one of your siblings, her ex-in-laws,
Mm-hmm.
were German Jews, and they had a custom in their family of cooking a goose for Hanukkah. I guess the Germans
Interesting.
think maybe they got that from the Goyish Germans who would cook, goose for
A
Christmas.
lot of it was
Yeah.
cultural, yeah.
So, your sister was telling me that there's a whole technique to cooking a goose where first of all you have to put it on something like a beer can or something, keep it upright in the pan,
Mm-hmm.
and every I think half hour or so or 15 minutes, I've got what the time was, you have to take like a sharp prongs and poke it all over to let the fat that's that's melting run out. Because if you don't do that, if you don't poke it and let the fat run out,
Yeah.
that the goose is so fat that actually it would explode in the oven.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Um, that's
Are you looking online for goose recipes?
yeah, sure. Um, yeah, if we could just go ahead and focus on
Goose recipes.
goose recipes. Uh, so
I remember one time you brought home duck eggs. Now
yes,
that was an experience.
that was cool. They were
Yeah.
very they're a little bigger than regular chicken eggs.
The
Yes, the
yellow
yolk.
takes the yolk takes up almost the whole
Yeah.
egg, and they taste very rich. Very
Yes.
good.
Yes, I
Yes.
like that. And I got a duck one. We killed some ducks, some geese.
I did.
The-
You killed it. You brought a friend of yours over who was a shochet, and he
Yeah.
shechted the ducks for you, and
Yeah.
you had to pull off all the feathers and
Pull
everything.
off all the
You
feathers.
know.
Yeah, he said the quickest thing to do once they're dead is rip
Uh-huh.
off the skin as soon as possible. If not, it gets stuck to the skin. And it's very hard to get rid of.
Oh my gosh! So
Yeah.
just cut and rip off the skin.
Yeah, what it was, they sliced open and they
Uh-huh.
just peeled away
I've done
everything.
that. I've done that before, where I peel away
Yeah,
the skin on a chicken or a turkey. I've done that, but not a duck.
that's
Ducks are very fatty, right?
yeah. Well, the duck's fat is different. I mean,
Mhm.
we went to the restaurant today. And we had that duck. I think it tasted freezer burnt. It really tasted freezer burnt. I think not a lot of people ordered the duck. And
Um,
also the duck itself was dry. I don't know. I'm just
yeah,
being
I was disappointed too. I felt the same way that the duck wasn't properly prepared. Yeah.
yeah, I guess.
I've had duck before, and it was sweeter. It was sweeter and more tender.
What nightmares have you ever had that like woke you up at
Remind
night?
you that I had this baby that grew up to this big, obnoxious, nasty guy.
Yeah, I'm not nasty. I'm more friendly. I'm a
Oh,
fuzzy
should I
bear.
tell you about the dream I had about? Shall we
Yeah,
broach
yeah,
the
go
dream I
ahead.
had about your father the night before your sister's wedding?
Go right ahead,
Okay,
please.
we recently, thank God, Baruch Hashem, we did the mazinka. We married off our youngest kid, our youngest kid,
Not our
girl,
last. All right.
and so I was talking about um, I was talking to the family members about how I've been looking forward to doing the mazinkala. I want to do
Mhm.
the mazinkala. Like there was one family member who said, "I don't think you're supposed to do the mazinkala because Tati's not here." I said, "Listen, I've waited all these years to do the mazinkala. I'm doing the mazinkala." So right before the wedding,
It was the night before the
that
wedding.
night,
That was it.
that night, that night, in for real, I was coughing a lot. I always get this horrible cough when I get up north.
Yeah.
And so half the night I was coughing. I finally managed to get to sleep, and I have this dream that your father's standing next to the bed holding a broom. And he says to me, "Hurry up and get out of bed. You have to sweep out the entire house."
Oh wow.
And I said to him, "I spent half the night coughing. I'm too tired." And I turned back over in my dream and went back to sleep.
Sweet. Sweet. It's time to getting things done. That's what it takes, Momenta. Tell me what's real deal. Oh, rah, 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 rah. I was so angry. Trying to think what else. because I want to poke the bear a little bit now. Because now that I feel like I'm at a peak, I want to kind of push the envelope with
Mhm.
this podcast thing. I did some research and whatnot, but
About goose recipes?
yeah, ghost recipes. Um, Actually, what kind of nightmares did you have as a kid?
Years as a kid.
Yeah, like different. I guess I don't know. Like it's
I
all.
had a dream once that my mother had turned into this big hairy monster and was coming after me.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
What about what about?
Oh yeah, when I was 8 years old,
Hmm.
I caught the Asian flu. I didn't realize at the time. I was reading just about, when COVID hit.
Yeah.
I was reading a list of the deadliest flus
Hmm.
and the history of the deadliest flus, and it said the 1958 Asian flu was one of the deadliest. I
Oh
went,
wow.
"Oh my gosh." As a kid, I didn't realize that I had something so actually deadly. Anyway, all I remember was, um, it was a custom in our house that when you got sick, my mother would take you out of the bedroom and you would stay on the couch in the living room. She wanted you out in the, out like in an area away from the other kids on the couch. Couch was your place, and she would make you chicken soup and hot tea. That was delicious, by the way. The chicken soup we had before, I told you, with the chicken feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked
So it
about
was the chicken soup and rice with the hot tea. That was delicious. But all I remember is having this horrible fever, feeling so sick and so achy. And then I finally fell asleep and I had a dream I was in school
that. Oh.
and sitting in my classroom. I'm 8 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm sick. I'm not supposed to be here. So I start raising my hand to try to get the teacher's attention. I start saying, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm sick. I'm not supposed to be here. And then I woke up.
Oh wow. That's
That
really
was that was
that's a cute. See, that's a cute story. That's a nice, cute, sweet story. I can clip it. I can put it up on YouTube individually. It's a nice, cute, sweet story. Speaking of cute, sweet stories,
Yeah, by the way, this teacher was a really psychologically abusive, nasty. She was yeah, I feel sorry for her in a way now that I'm a teacher, that
yeah,
after I became a teacher.
yeah.
I realized what she went through. She was right out of college. She was young, and they gave her a class of 50 kids. 50 kids we
Oh,
had
yeah,
in
the
class.
boomers.
Yeah,
Everything was crowded, right?
right.
That's
Yes, we had 50 kids in our class, and then we had kids like me who I had trouble following directions. I
mhm.
really needed someone next to me to show me exactly what to do, because if you gave directions, it was like, huh?
Yeah, ADHD thing, right?
Yeah, right, I
Yeah.
did. And so she would put me down in front of the class. She would call me names. She told me I was bullheaded, and
What's
she would
bullheaded?
bullheaded means stubborn.
But that's not bad.
She would there was one time she was talking to this woman who she didn't realize was one of my mother's friends, and some boy hands me a note, and I couldn't read at the time, and I think about the note actually said, "Charlene, you are a bastard."
Really? What grade were you in?
Second.
Oof. That's a lot for
And
second
I'm looking,
grade.
I'd never seen that word.
Yeah.
So I came over to her and I showed her the note, said, This boy handed me this note," and she just yells at me, "Go and sit down." She just yells at me,
Yeah.
"Go and sit down." And then she turns to this woman who, not knowing she's one of my mother's best friends, and says, "Ooh, that horrible Charlene Dickman. I can't stand her."
Ooh.
And this woman ran to my mother and she says, "You better get your daughter out of that class
Yeah.
now." So my mother, in those days, there was something with my parents' generation.
Mhm.
I think my mother always felt bad that she did not have a college degree.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in my mother's generation, a lot of them did lack some education. A lot of them, like my father, had been forced to quit school to support the
Because
family.
of the Great
Yeah,
Depression.
right. Some of them were World War II survivors, Holocaust survivors, whose education was interrupted, their whole childhood was
Yeah.
interrupted, and so a lot of them idolized a lot of them were very, very reluctant to want to start up with the teacher.
Mhm.
They didn't want to start up with the teacher. They were happy their kids were in school getting an education, and they did not want to start up with the teacher. So my mother decided to go to the office and to discuss the situation with the teacher. And she tells the principal what happened. The principal calls in the teacher. The teacher lies and goes, "Oh, Charlene, I love her. She's such a sweet little girl." And the principal looks at my mother and says, "Well,"
And she was quiet.
and so my mother, didn't know what to do. She was quiet and didn't say anything. And I think to that tea, I think back, I thought, I mean, the teacher, I know on one hand, it's a new job. She doesn't want to look bad, but she could have covered herself by saying, yes, I think there's a personality conflict
But here's the
or
thing.
personality clash, something like that. And maybe she'll do better, or maybe she will do better in a smaller class. You
It's
know,
funny you say that because it's like it's the big debate nowadays with parents is, do you tell your kids you're sorry you made a mistake?
I think so. I think I've done that. I think
So
when someone says, I've done this as a teacher, as a matter of fact. I
okay.
did, and when I admitted to the class that I made a mistake and apologized, do you know that their respect for me actually increased?
So that's the thing what happens now where there's this whole idea of parenting nowadays where you can tell your kids you're sorry you made a mistake and that you're human. And
Hmm.
that there's this little bit of a pushback where people saying, no, you should be like a demigod, you should be perfect, they should look
No,
up to you. So whatever.
no,
I
yeah,
agree with you and I agree that you should admit you made
yeah,
mistakes
and they'll look up
and
to you more.
and hopefully God willing
Yeah,
that will happen.
they
Um
will. They'll look up to you more because they'll know that you're not BSing them. You're not,
yes.
you're being honest with them. You're trying to be the best parent you can and showing them that, hey, we all make mistakes.
Yeah. And I think that also helps them with their self-esteem and they feel like they can't
Yes.
because I mean being a kid growing up in the 90s and early 2000s where it's like there is this level of perfection that you're trying to obtain where it's like if you make a mistake you're the worst person in the world you can't you're not going to be able to succeed in anything you're going to mount anything
Yeah,
but
that was my generation. They
but
said that our
yeah I
parents
think like I said lately it's been
that we were told. We were told that by our parents.
lately it's been more of
Yeah.
a break the cycle I think because
Mhm.
that's just prevalent because past generations but now we're trying to do this thing where you don't have to be perfect you're fine just the way you are and that's
Mhm.
okay and
Mhm.
I think it's getting people to finally able to breathe and not feel so constricted or restrained
Mhm.
um but I have another question I was going to ask you and this is the thing I'm very curious about what did your parents fight about a lot when you were a kid?
I'm trying to think because I know they fought a lot.
Yeah, right? It's a 1950s couple. It's more of like a anyway, stop, see, man, what is that, man? Like transatlantic accent.
No, no, no. My parents weren't trans. My
I
parents,
know. It's like
yeah.
Polish,
My,
Ukrainian, no
no, no,
Hungarian,
no.
no
My
Polish.
parents, well, they were
You
born and raised in Baltimore,
born and raised in
so
Baltimore.
they had a
Hey, hon,
regular
how's it going? Let's get out of you. You know, look at city. All right, never mind. I'm done.
they had a regular mid-Atlantic accent,
Yeah,
regular,
yeah, yeah.
but well, actually in Baltimore, your Jews spoke with more of a clear mid-Atlantic accent,
Yes,
but it was the old non-Jewish
that
families
have the Baltimore
that had
accent.
the Baltimore
Hey,
accent,
It's Baltimore. It's
Baltimore
Baltimore, hun.
accent,
It's
yeah,
Baltimore. Yeah.
accent,
Hey, you got
accent, the E's,
the
Baltimore
X and
E's.
hey on you go down. Yeah, it's funny because a lot of
Hmm.
even nowadays, like I say I'm from Baltimore, and they're like, you don't sound like you're from Baltimore. Like, well, I don't really have the accent because I think in
Hmm.
the Jewish community, because like you
Hmm.
might live in Baltimore, but you're gonna have like New Yorkers come in.
Yes,
You're gonna have people from
right.
California come in. You're gonna have people from Pittsburgh come in.
Hmm.
You're gonna have people from Florida come in. So
That's right.
like you're getting this whole chaunt of different types of people with different
Hmm. Right.
accents, and so you're not really going to have like the whole Baltimore accent. Like I'll say Merlin and Baltimore and hey and like a little bit of like hey hun. I might say that
Hmm.
ever so often, but it's not going to be this real thick
Right.
Baltimore accent.
I was like, you or one of your brothers had that teacher from South Baltimore who told one of the boys to go to the back of the room.
Probably,
The room,
probably one of my
room.
brothers.
He
I don't
goes,
remember
he goes, go to the back of the room. The what?
the rum.
The room.
Yeah, I don't. It might have been me. It might have been someone else. Either way, I don't remember. But yeah, your parents fighting. Go.
Uh, Parents fighting. Let me see.
About money.
Money. Oh, boy, yeah,
Wow, that touched a nerve.
money.
That touched a nerve.
I wish we didn't have much.
Yeah, yep, yep.
I remember my father telling us like whenever we'd ask him to buy us something, buy us this, buy us that. Sorry, I can't. We're poor. Sorry, I can't. We're poor. Finally, my mother goes, "Well, you stop telling the kids." So my father says to her, "Well, we should take our rich."
Well, there's this whole idea, and there's this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad that elaborates more on it, where even if you aren't necessarily you know, well-to-do, there is a certain way of framing it, of saying it's not in the budget right now.
Mhm.
This isn't something that we need.
Yeah.
Maybe if you want it, you can earn it. Work hard and make money. You'll be able to succeed in getting it. Like finding ways to show that you can obtain it, and not necessarily put down and have them stuck with a poor man's
Well,
mentality.
I was talking one time to a woman here in the from community. She and I were in very similar positions where we did, we did not have a lot. And we said, how do we handle our kids wanting something and we tell them we can't have it because we don't have the money, we don't want to give them the impression that, hey, that, being downtrodden and poor, whatever, what do we say? And so she said, you know what? She says, a good line to use is, it's not necessary. So she put it,
Yeah,
it's not necessary. Yeah.
because no, well, I like that because you know why? Because it really isn't that necessary. You don't need a
Mhm,
lot in life.
mhm.
You really don't. And I think when people get more greedy and selfish, they feel like they need more. And like that's why like I have to remind myself to feel like it's okay. I don't need it that much. But back to the fighting.
Then there's something else with the one time
Oh,
I was at a store in New Jersey one time,
yeah.
and this man came in with his kids. It was a video store,
Okay.
electronics store, electronics, video, all that,
Radio Shack, basically.
the latest gizmo, something like that. The video games, everything. Video games, whatever whatever you want, electronics. So he says to his kids, "Hey, kids, want to buy something?" They go, "Yeah." He goes, "Good, keep wanting it." And I cracked up laughing. I told this one to my sisters. They laughed. They said that sounded just like our father.
But that's a great idea. But that's a great idea because it's like
Keep
that's
wanting it.
that's how I got into video games when Tati never paid for a video game. No, no, sorry, take that back. When he saw how hard I worked getting that Game Boy and
Oh.
raising the money, not raising, more like selling things and getting the money. He paid for one video game and then he got me another video game I played. I think it was Wario World 3
Mhm,
for Game Boy Color. He bought me.
mhm.
And I was just so excited. I played it all the time. But even before then, I found out ways to play these games for free on the computer. I mean, I did give the computer a computer virus, and it was terrible, and Connie got mad at me. But it was good to the point where I'm gonna make this happen. It's gonna be fine. I'm gonna live and learn. But did your parents maybe fight about in-laws? Perhaps was there any like
Um, trying to
they're all dead now. It's fine. Talk to them.
think, in-laws. I know my mother did not get along with my mother did not get along with my father's parents. Um,
What are they?
my grandfather, my father's father, was old Ukrainian,
Yeah,
very domineering,
yeah.
and it was getting along with him was kind of hard. And also, he was disappointed that my mother had three girls and
Ooh.
no boys. Like my grandmother one time said to him that she wanted to go, they should go out to dinner and celebrate that now they have three beautiful grandchildren. And my grandfather said, "I'm not celebrating three girls."
Oh, that's terrible. That's
He was
that's
very,
that's sad and
yeah.
sexist.
And I remember my mother used to call behind her mother-in-law's back. My mother would call her tactless.
What would she do? She would just
Well, she would say things that were really very tacky, not realizing. Let's put it this way: when it came to social
etiquette,
not just etiquette,
social ineptitude.
social, yeah, like feeling out a
She was probably
situation.
autistic or something, most
She could
likely.
have been. So she would, for my mother's birthday, I remember one time she gave her a dress,
Hmm.
and so my mother thanked her for it, and she says, "Yes, that dress is good for stout people."
Oh God, yeah, that's a real oof. And I can just imagine. You know what the thing is? There was so much mental health problems, especially in the Jewish community. Like there's always like this like riddled with mental health issues that like there were so many people that had like if if you put them back, put them into the present time, they might have like definitely PTSD,
Hmm.
definitely a level of autism on some kind of spectrum.
Hmm.
You know, this definitely most likely it could be like some level of bipolar or something like that, where like they could have gotten better help and people could have had a better life.
Well, did I ever tell you about my poor grandmother with the herring and the pickles,
No, tell me.
pickles in the pantry?
No, 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 no.
Okay, here's the story.
New story, guys.
My
Fresh.
okay, my grandfather hated herring and pickles, anything. By the way, I thought that was his, shtick.
Yeah.
But evidently, I met a woman
Hmm.
who I've met other people like this, that they're very sensitive to that pickly or vinegar smell.
Vinegar
Yeah.
flavored stuff.
And she can't even be in the same room as pickles or
Mm.
herring. This one, the minute you take out pickles or herring, she's got to leave the room.
Oh,
It
wow.
somehow it just makes her totally nauseous. She can't stand it. So my grandfather, not only would he, of course, not touch any of the stuff, he would not permit my grandmother to even have it in the house.
Okay.
And he was I don't know, it was kind of sad. I mean, he really she couldn't have this, she couldn't have that. He really was very over controlling,
Mhm.
which in those days was
Right, it's the
today.
man that takes care of the woman.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's all right, it's all right.
anyway, but no, really years ago it was
No, I know, it was terrible. We can joke about it now because he
yeah.
doesn't exist that
So
much anymore
right.
as
We
far
hope
as
it
I know,
doesn't,
or
except for some couples. But anyway,
yeah, what is it?
so anyway, so my mother used to keep a jar of herring at our house. We lived just 2 blocks down from my grandmother.
Mhm.
And my grandmother, when my grandfather was working, she would run over to our house. She would have herring for
Oh,
lunch, right? And she would
yes. I remember you saying
rinse out
something
her
like this,
mouth,
but it
right?
makes more sense now that you're
Then there
saying
was
it.
one time we knew that my grandfather would not permit her to have pickles in the house, and she loved pickles.
Mm,
So one time my mother gave me a jar of pickles, and I had this like little carry, this little tote bag,
mhm.
and my mother put it in the tote bag, and she put a bunch of like newspapers and stuff on top of it, and she says, "Here," she goes, "I want you to sneak this to your grandmother. Don't let your grandfather see it,
Mm,
and tell them that you're just coming to visit them." I was like, I think I was like 10 years old,
okay.
something like that. So I walked down to my grandmother's house, my little tote bag, whatever, and I come in and said, "Hi, grandma, hi, what do hi, nice to see you here. Yeah, I came just to visit you." And I sit down in the kitchen with my grandmother at the table, and we're just talking. And my grandfather, ice cream truck comes.
Mm,
So my grandfather loved ice cream, and whenever the ice cream truck, he would buy ice cream for himself and for my grandmother.
that's
So
cute.
he runs out to buy ice cream for my grandmother and for my grandmother and himself. And I very quickly take the jar of pickles out. I hand it to her. She grabs the jar of pickles and she runs. And she had one of those like old pantries
Mhm.
that that people would actually store food in, especially during the wintertime. It was cold. There was no insulation on this pantry. And she would hide the pickles underneath like one of the bottom shelves of the pantry and put like some like potatoes or something in front of it. And she would only, she would sneak the pickles when my grandfather wasn't home.
I think we've talked about this on the podcast, but I
We
think it's an
did,
amazing story. No, 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 not this story. This story
what?
was new,
What the
but
pickle story?
I'm talking about the
Yeah.
death story of your grandfather, how he knew the story of right before he passed away.
Oh yeah. Oh
That was
wow.
really fucking that was really, like,
Should we repeat it for new listeners?
I think for new listeners in general, it's a great story. I wanna
Okay.
make sure I have this on record.
Okay, so what happened was, he for they used to come over and visit us almost every Sunday when we
Okay.
moved out to the county,
Yeah.
and, my grandfather then he would come out and visit us, and he would, drive us out way I don't know where, I think Route 40 or something. There was this place out at Route 40 that sold, it was the soft ice cream that was called custard, a custard
Okay.
ice cream, whatever. It was like Mr. Softee.
Okay.
And so it was like this, this ice cream place, and he would drive us all that out there, and he would buy us, me and my sisters, this nice soft custard ice cream. They called it custard, and so somehow I always pictured my grandfather dying on a Sunday in very nice weather, like a
Mm.
nice spring day, because that's when he would come out on a nice spring day and drive us out to the country to get this ice cream.
When did you think about this? What age?
What about my grandfather?
Dying.
I don't know. I just always had that feeling.
Really?
I
Okay.
always had that feeling that my grandfather was going to pass away
Okay.
on like one of these nice, pretty spring Sunday days.
Yeah.
And sure enough, what happened was that weekend, right before that weekend, when he went shopping with my grandmother, I think a Thursday or Friday, and he totally filled up the cart with food. And she says, "What are you doing? It's just you and I. Why are you filling up the cart with food?" And he says, "I want to make sure that you're okay." And she thought it was very strange. And then it was May with beautiful weather.
Mhm.
He called the oil company and he had them totally fill up the oil tank. And she says, "What are you doing having them fill up the oil tank on right before the summertime?" He says, "I want to make sure you're okay." He woke up very early that Sunday morning, like 6 o'clock. He took a shower. She said he cleaned the whole house. And then he lay down on the couch like Aharon HaKohen. Boom.
Yeah.
And you know, and
That's the way to go, in my
my
opinion.
my grandmother was very, devastated.
Yeah.
We went, she She called the ambulance. I think one of the neighbors called us to tell us that my grandpa had been taken to the hospital. We went to Sinai Hospital to see my grandmother sitting there crying, and we come in and we hear my grandmother scream at my father, father, Eddie, you don't have a father. Children, you don't have a grandfather, and she starts to cry. Um, and that was,
So that'll be.
no. What else can you say?
Then it was just shivering. It
Yeah.
was just a
And then
whole
she
system.
kept saying, he went so fast, I didn't have time to tell him anything. And I thought to myself, they were married for like over 52, like 52 years or so.
Wow.
I thought, 52 years, what did you want to tell him? What did you want to tell him that you couldn't tell him? Take out the garbage.
Yeah. I mean, what would you want to tell Tati that you never got around to? Yeah. What would you want to tell Tati you never got around to saying? You already spoke your mind. What it really is there else to say? What, I love you. I wish you the best.
I think I told. I think I told him everything I wanted to tell him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a nice nail on the
Yeah.
head.
I mean, yeah. Your brother asked me if I made my peace with your father. I said I sure did. I get peace of my mind.
Yeah. What about Bubby's parents to Zadie? Did Zadie have any issues with Bubby's parents? Or was there like always a different interaction with them?
I mean, my mother, my mother's father.
Your mother's father and mother.
They were very peaceful people. They were kind of
Mm,
like they were kind of like they were just very nice people who did not believe in making trouble.
really?
They were,
Head down, nose clean, or just more of like I'm just more of a chill kind of guy.
no, they didn't want they didn't want they were very careful about shalom bayis. They
Nice.
didn't want to say anything that was going to make people upset or anything like that. Or you know, my grandfather, my father's father, actually did not like my father marrying my mother.
Oh, really? Why?
Um,
What did he say? You know the answer. What
I
was
think
it?
I think he wanted my father to marry the shoe lady,
Oh, wait, shoe lady. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Pop with
the pickle
the
queen,
pickle queen.
the pickle.
That we have a whole special episode on that. But what's a shoe lady?
My
She run a shoe
father,
store or something?
her her family was very rich, and they owned this very successful shoe store.
Wow, they weren't kidding.
And so my grandfather thought, marry a rich family, whatever. And so my father, evidently I think it was because of my grandfather's prodding, he dated this girl and eventually he got engaged to her. But he realized as time went on that, hey, this was not a good fit.
Yeah.
And that's funny, a shoe lady, not.
Waka 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 waka.
So I asked when I was a little girl, we found out later that my father had been engaged to somebody else before he met my mother, married her. So I asked my father one day, well, what happened with the woman with the shoe store? And so my father said, let's put it this way. He says, I've seen people put their with feet in their shoes, but this was the first time I ever met somebody who had their head in shoes.
Oh, that's very childish, very dad joke. Like, I always got engaged, and then
It was just one of these things where
yeah,
and the way that they broke up was um I think that it was kind of like mutual, that they
yeah.
had a
It's like this is
discussion. They
working
like
out.
she realized it too. Hey, this is not the right fit, and
Yeah.
it was very amicable, and
Well, that's why I think it's always
yeah.
important to be okay with quitting something. I think that there's too many times people might feel like you have to always follow through. And then I think sometimes it's okay to quit. It's okay to move on. It's okay to, like hedge your like not hedge your bets, but like cut your losses and move on. And I was gonna tell you, I'll tell it on the podcast because I don't think it's funny, but like I don't think anyone's gonna hear it.
No one's going to hear it on a
Well,
podcast. We got thousands of listeners out
well,
there.
well, it's not that. It's just that like it's something where like I was gonna say it over at dinner, but I didn't say it at dinner because I wasn't sure if it would be the appropriate thing. But
Uh-oh. Is this
this no, it's I'm putting too much hype on it. I'm putting too
okay?
much hype on it.
Okay.
We were talking about Tati working for caterers back in the day, and
Hmm.
that when they would have leftover food, they'd bring it home to us, and
Hmm.
we'd have food to eat.
Hmm.
And the other thing we enjoyed was that Tati would always come home and bring some bar bat mitzvah trinkets.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
And we'd always appreciate it. It would be like a little sunglasses or a
Hmm.
little fan or a little something that said, it's Katie's bat mitzvah in 1995. Like it
Right.
was just something to enjoy.
Yes.
So when I was dating my ex, I was working for Yafa, I there was a bar mitzvah there. They hanging out sunglasses. I got an extra pair, and I was like, "Oh, it's a cute thing to give to her." I come over the next. I think it was that night.
Mhm.
I came back. It was late, but I came back and I was like, "Oh, hey, by the way, I got you a gift." And I gave her the sunglasses, and she got really mad at me.
What?
And she's like, "Why are you wasting your time giving me this stupid gift?" Blah blah blah. She's like, and she like threw it at me and whatnot. It was just
This
like,
is when you were dating or you were married?
yeah, dating. Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying. When it's time to quit,
Oh
quit.
my gosh.
Right?
I didn't you should have told me about that.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't tell anybody because I was trying to just do things
Yeah.
myself.
Should have known. Oh, well, never mind.
Should have known
Okay.
better. It
Okay.
should have known better. It is what it is. But it's just it's a also this is at the end of the episode too. So like hopefully I stuffed this one in like right there, like yeah, you can't find it.
Oh my
But yeah, no, it
god.
was just dick, it was just whatever. It's another reason of why like she was a narcissist who had her own issues. Um, but it's just it's I think if I was told it's okay to quit something, I don't think I would have been in a worse situation than I was in. And that's why I think it's so important to not just be taught to work hard on something, but
Mhm.
also to quit at something.
You have something. You got a very good point because well, the way I raised your kids, which I thought was right at the time, was I didn't want you kids to be quitters. I wanted you to, put forth effort and not just, I was always raised. You don't just walk away from a bad situation. You just try to work with it. But you are right. There is a point where someone has got to quit, and but that's the thing. Like where do you get that fine line between, hey, I gave it my all, and I see this is not a good fit, and it's time to quit.
That's called being an adult, and that's a learning curve you have to figure out.
Mhm.
That's called just being an adult. And I think you'll teach your kids to in my head, like I'll teach God willing my kids to just work hard, never quit, work hard, never quit. And once they're 18, I'll tell them, well, now that you're an adult, you're gonna learn adult things. And some things adults do that's very important is quitting. And you're gonna
And
start
learning
learning
when
and
to do
learning
it.
when to quit it and how to quit.
Mhm, mhm.
Because it's very important to know, but it's not something you should learn right away. I think there's certain
Interesting.
aspects of
Mhm,
learning where it's like, you don't need to know this right now.
mhm.
You don't need to be taught this right now. You'll be taught this later on. You'll figure this out later on. I'll explain to you later on, but you get to be a kid now. You get to be 13 now. You get to be 14 now. You don't have to jump to 25 at the age of 13.
Mhm.
There's no reason for it.
Right.
And that's the balance. And you know what? I might make mistakes being a parent. I'm pretty sure I will. I hope I make the right ones. I hope I make the right mistakes. Because you want to make the right mistakes. Because the right mistakes are the ones where like, oh, you probably shouldn't have done that, but it's a fun story and he learned his lesson. So it's just like that's kind of how it is.
Every one time I'm learning your lesson. Every one time when Etty was real little, I was peeling garlic, and she wanted a piece of garlic, and she wanted garlic, and she wanted garlic, and she was crying and crying. She wanted, 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 wanted. I tried to tell her this is not good. It's not going to taste good. And she cried, 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 cried. Says, "Okay, fine, okay, here you go." And I handed her a piece of garlic, and she goes, "Thank you." I go, "I wouldn't go thanking you so fast." And she bit into it.
It kind of reminds me of there's this one YouTube video you could find. It's this little kid eating an onion, and you hear it's obviously the mother recording it, recording the kid, and she's like, "Are you enjoying that onion?" He's like, "It's an apple." She's like, "Are you sure? Because it looks like an onion. Does it taste like an onion?" He's eating it. It's an apple. It's an apple. It tastes good. It's an apple. Mm. And like the kid's just biting into the onion, just trying to like, just being stubborn enough to like, no, God, this tastes good.
So what's the upshot of the whole thing? Does he eventually
No, I think it just ran for
finish
like
it?
I think it ran for like a minute and a half. I didn't finish watching it. It was just a quick little funny clip of a kid crying with onion, stubbornly saying it's an apple because they want to admit that say it's an apple.
But then one time when your brother Yehuda was like barely 2 years old, when he picked up the box turtle, that your cousin Amy had this little box turtle in a
Mhm.
box by my mother's house, and I'm reading the Jewish Times, and I hear Yehuda and his little voice go ball, and I see the turtle fly across the room.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Oh, jeez. What actually? Maybe what did your parents ever tell you that like maybe you learned your lesson because they didn't do it the right way?
They learned their lesson, or I did
You
learn.
did. They gave you bad advice, but it worked out.
How about my whole life? They had advice.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, I'm being serious though.
I
Like
kept
like
trying to
like
think.
like a bad
Yeah.
advice thing where it's
So yes, I think one of the bad. My mother um, was my mother was very anxious for us to go out with boys
Hmm.
and to, to go out with boys and to, I don't know
She
what it
didn't
was.
want you to go with
She
boys?
did. No, she
She
wanted us.
wanted you.
It was considered part in those days was considered by like the regular Goy Chevelle part of good growing up at the age of 13, 14 to start dating boys and interacting with the other
Yeah.
sex. It was considered good that this is part of your development. And she liked the idea of us just going out with a lot of different boys and having fun instead of concentrating on friendships, like especially with girls. She used to say to us, um, "One girl is worth 10 boys." Like
Really.
she didn't really want, she didn't want us like she didn't train us to value um, friendships among girls and to value and to really look at to value an actual friendship, actual relationship. She just wanted us to go out with lots of different boys and have and just go to dances, go to movies, and just have fun like that.
So she didn't really teach you the idea of loving yourself first before falling in love with a boy.
Right, and I think
Yeah.
I think that was very common in those days.
I That's why it's so
Mm,
important not to, in a way, hang out with the opposite sex so much when you're younger and just start learning to love yourself, especially
yeah.
when you're a kid
Oh yeah.
that's like, hormonal as a
Mhm.
teenager. That's always a thing where it's like I love and hate the fact that I didn't hang out with girls that much when I was growing up because it's
Mhm.
like the important thing was I learned first off how to be myself, how to love myself, and like it eventually worked out after a tumble, but like there was a point where you know you could spend time more on your education and spend time more on your future than worrying about hanging out with girls that much and things like that. And like eventually it was I think it's such a natural reaction anyways. There's no need to just push it, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
boys and girls are naturally going to be together on some level, so there shouldn't be a need to constantly push it so much.
Oh, they did. Yes, there was a lot of that, and one of the best things that ever happened to me was when I became from went to Machon Khana,
Yeah.
and the principal in charge of Machon Khana, when we first got there, said, "No men for the first 6 months you're here,"
Mm,
and that was the best thing anyone did for me. I
yeah.
was able to get in touch with who I was finally.
Yeah.
I said, "Why didn't someone take me when I was 15 and lock me in a room and said no boys for 6 months?"
Yeah, I guess so. All right, well, I love you. Have a wonderful
Love you.
Shabbos
You too.
and good Yom
Good
too.
yeah.